Oh, wow. I didn't know that Gawker published Trump's cell phone number.
Oh, yeah. All right. Good afternoon to you on the interwebs. This is Black Mountain Radio. I'm John Douglas. This is my co-host, Daniel Lowber.
Hetero life partner.
Oh, always. And today we're going to be talking about Las Vegas, its development, and
the Meadows.
And what the future looks like in Las Vegas, especially with the upcoming legalization of marijuana and recreational marijuana establishment in the state, in the city.
Yeah, just tripping balls all the time. I mean, tourism has really rebounded from the lows of the financial crisis in 2008, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. And it's gone up about 3% a year the last few years. And so by 2019, 2020, it's going to be about 45 million people a year coming here. I think we just cracked 41 million for the first time last year. So legal cannabis is here in the form of medical cannabis. The first dispensary just opened this week up in northern Nevada. And the dispensaries down in southern Nevada should be opening here in the next 90 days or so. They had 2 inspectors who were responsible for checking compliance with like the 20,000 word ordinances walk off the job. So there's one poor bastard up in Reno has to like drive or fly around everywhere by, I assume, like, you know, some sort of like ski plane.
You know, what's interesting to me is Las Vegas is by far not the only place to gamble in the country anymore. In the 1950s and 1960s, there were very few places to do so legally, far less than there are today. Yet we are breaking tourism records between the shows we have, the attractions that are not just necessarily gambling. And
ass and titties. Ass and titties.
Yeah.
Nightclubs for those who are.
We're going to Little Darlings after this, right?
Well, we're going to reopen Larry's Villa for one day and one day only.
Beautiful.
We need those bullet holes and C-sections and burns and scars to on our Tuesday noon.
Still nothing better, a digression, but still nothing better than Florida. When I was in Florida and I had a kill time because I was on my motorcycle and there was a strip club across the street from where I was. I was at poker training school, and a buddy of mine went in, and this strip club had a stripper who was about my size on stage gyrating joyfully. Ugh. And another little methed out skinny white chick walked in with rallies or checkers, they're the same thing, and handed the girl on stage fries, and the girl on stage continued to gyrate sexfully and eat rallies, fries,
while
she was dancing. That's I think a perfect example of why Florida is so wonderful.
I think that's a perfect example of America. Right, I like her confidence that she just kept going for it. She was like, I know I got it. I know I got it going on.
Now I smell like salt and potato grease. Much better.
In addition to patchouli and sadness.
The only thing missing is like a stripper in one of those like America wheelchair carts, you know, rolling, just
little rascal scooters.
Rascal scooter. She can walk perfectly. There's nothing medically wrong with her, but she's just on stage clicking that joystick.
Yeah, I bet she could do a pretty sweet like 1080 in that thing. Oh, I wonder if she could do a wheelie in it and then like do like a 360 in that. But then when like the front wheels come down, like all that combined mass and ass just like snaps them off. So
anyway,
anywho, no, we have been the benefit of 50 years of marketing,
right?
Both in the form of actual tourism ads, one of the best ad campaigns ever. What happens in Vegas stays in Vegas. Never been remotely true. Syphilis travels, but great advertising on the part of the local tourism board, and then just being portrayed in so many movies. That's honestly the biggest export. You know? How many movies, you know, The Hangover, Ocean's 11, 12, 13, Casino, so many iconic movies that have been set in Las Vegas.
Yeah.
And when, because that's the sole reason this place exists. Yes, you can gamble in other places, but that's not what they're there for.
Right.
Vegas exists for people to gamble, to get fucked up, and to get fucked.
Yeah.
Those are the 3 reasons this city exists. It wasn't built for those reasons. It was built because they needed, you know, someplace to water the horses halfway between the rail line of from LA to Salt Lake City.
Right.
But that's why this place is still around. And so when people want to go do those things, this place, or, you know, Las Vegas pops into their minds because that's what it's here for.
Right.
Outside of its 10-year stint in the 90s of like, let's make it family friendly, which bombed hard as it deserved to. It's, you know, I think the expression is it's Disneyland for adults.
Right, and you add marijuana to that equation. I think you're going to see
legal marijuana.
Legal marijuana.
It's like people have just not been doing it for the last 60 years.
And statistics have shown that at no point in the last 4 years, the large majority of the war on drugs, has there been any reduction in the consumption of marijuana or most drugs. If people want a drug, they're going to get a drug.
Of course. People want anything, they're going to get it.
Right. Supply, demand, basic economic principles. And so you've got, on top of the alcohol, on top of the entertainment, whether it's adult entertainment, strippers and sex, I mean,
Cirque du Soleil shows,
right.
Or
very few people speak about
singers.
It, but every corner in Las Vegas has a massage parlor, which is where you can go to get fucked. Yeah. I mean, that's just what it is. And so
you got guys on every street corner handing you little like girls direct to you,
right?
Whether they're girls or direct to you or otherwise, is you know, the execution falls a little short, but
right.
they're advertising.
So you bring legal marijuana, you're creating a real synergy amongst all the other elements of Las Vegas. It's perfect.
Yeah, I mean, because the way I look at it is like, okay, so we got 45 million people coming here. Recreational marijuana is going to be on the ballot for legalization November of 2016. So that passes, say it's going to take a year, at least maybe 18 months to get that up and running. So you're talking about mid-2018 before it really gets off the ground.
Right.
Let's say you got 45 million people a year coming here anyway.
Right.
And if there's legal weed, so say, I don't know, would be a good number, but like maybe 20-25% of those people coming here, like, ooh, if there's legal weed, they're going to buy some.
Sure.
Because it's still not going to be, there's going to be a huge explosion of states ratifying recreational cannabis in 2016. I think double-digit states as it stands, including Florida. But it's still going to be below it might be just over the majority in terms of like, okay, now cannabis is legalized. But for recreational cannabis, it's only going to be like, 12 to 15 states total. So,
right. And none of those states are Nevada, and none of those states other than Nevada have Las Vegas. So.
Well, New Mexico has Las Vegas. Actually, they had it first, but
right.
That place blows, much like most of New Mexico. Beautiful place, but man, there's nothing to do there. So they have the highest DUI rate in the country. There's nothing to do, but they get drunk.
No bueno.
So say you have 25% of the people who come here for 45 million are going to be purchasing recreational cannabis. It's like, what, 13 million people?
Sure.
And so if they're, spending $100 a pop, that's automatically, from visitors to this state, $1.3 billion, wow. Which would instantly make it the biggest recreational cannabis market on earth.
Yeah.
California is roughly a $1 billion market, give or take. Washington State, where I'm from, is projected to do about 300 million in sales this year. I think Colorado's like 400 or 500 million.
Okay.
But Las Vegas will be the biggest recreational cannabis market on earth, and it'll easily overtake Netherlands, and I think it'll stay that way.
Yeah,
because they're doing the strictest regulations here that have yet been passed, basically. And so by having the strictest requirements, the highest quality product, and just everything being with that level of oversight and control, people will. It's not just be like, oh yay, weed, and they bought some Mexican lawn clippings and it tasted like garbage, like back in the 60s and 70s when you're just kind of rolling the dice that you got something good. It's going to be very high quality, very potent, readily available stuff. And so you'll have, I believe, weed tourism like Washington and Colorado have seen the last couple of years on top of that.
Yeah.
I'm kind of rolling that into my projections for the 13 million people. But I mean, having, I think, like 85 dispensaries in Clark County, you're going to have the locals who can obviously take advantage of that. But the tourism aspect is going to be one of the largest new industries in the world, and it's going to be headquartered out of Las Vegas.
And on top of, I would say, a conservative yet accurate estimate of 25% of tourists buying marijuana when they're coming to Las Vegas, you've got to assume there's going to be a spike in the total number of people coming to Las Vegas. So that number of 41 million is probably going to spike easily up to 60 million.
Well, it's not getting crazy. I mean, Washington and Colorado have pretty decent weed tourism, but it's hard to use those numbers to project because nobody's really going to Washington and Colorado just because outside of the weed. And it's not like they're that easy to access either. Colorado's a lot easier to access for most of the country than Washington.
Right.
But even still, Las Vegas, having direct flights to every corner of the country and most corners of the globe.
Yeah.
I have no idea. I mean, will it get up to 50 million? I don't know. Will it get up to 60 million? We're just gonna have to wait and see.
What I think one of our biggest advantages is that aside from the gambling, the sex, the drugs, the rock and roll.
Good show, by the way. I don't know if you've seen it, the new Dennis Leary show on FX.
Oh, no.
Drugs and rock and roll.
No, but I love Dennis Leary.
Hilarious.
Yeah.
You should check it out.
Yeah, his CD in 1994. What was it? Asshole.
I Am Bill Hicks.
No.
With that asshole routine that he stole verbatim from Louis C.K.
Yeah. But yeah, no, I've always been a fan. But if you think about it, aside from those things, Las Vegas is a destination, convention destination. You've got hundreds of thousands of people who go to Las Vegas every year for conventions. And I mean, hey, if we're going to have a convention for our concrete company or the concrete industry, why the hell not have it in Las Vegas, where after the convention people can go get sex, drugs, and rock and roll. So, I mean, it's a perfect handshake deal. You've got the infrastructure to bring people here for their legitimate reason, their their notary public convention. And then when we're done with that, we're going to go out and hit the tables. And so you're going to see, you already see it right now. There's events like Champs and what were the other ones? The Hempfest.
All kinds of things.
Right. You've already got a de facto population of people coming to Las Vegas for marijuana, weed related, cannabis related conventioneering. But now it's going to be so much bigger because you can go to that convention, buy lots of different kinds of legal weed and enjoy it so much more. And yeah, I think it's going to be such a boon to the state and to the city. And you're going to see more change, more growth, probably since the 60s in Las Vegas.
Yeah, I mean, I'm fascinated to see what happens. And obviously we've got a little skin in the game ourselves that we don't need to go into here. But I mean, there's the reason that you've got giant consortiums going into the cannabis business here. It's not
hedge funds.
Yeah, it's not because medical's going to be bringing in the big bucks. It's a good start, but nobody's opening these dispensaries right now because they want to still be doing just medical in 2 years.
Right.
There's a firm in town that just closed their Series B financing, so their second round of financing for the layperson out there, to the tune of $28 million. And that's one. I mean, it's a vertically integrated operation. They're going to grow, they're going to process, they're going to extract, they're going to sell. I don't believe they have they're going to wholesale to dispensaries. I don't believe they have any dispensary licenses. But I mean, their second round of financing for one group was $28 million.
Wow.
So I haven't seen financing like that for this industry outside of the poor fools back in your home state of New York, who I think they're just issuing the 5 licenses this week. I believe they just did them. Where the estimated startup cost is going to be like all in like $25 million just to get a dispensary open. But there's also 5 licenses. And if there's any place in America that trumps Las Vegas in terms of global appeal and recognition, there's New York, LA, maybe Chicago.
Right.
And New York, obviously, number one with a bullet. It's been our most famous city and arguably the most famous city in the world for 100 years.
It's a cultural center. It's a center of education. It's a center of finance in the Western world. So yeah, I mean, it's just if the local population alone swells every day on Manhattan to over 11 million people, above the couple million who live there, I think it's the most heavily visited place on earth.
Yeah. So I'm interested to see how these kind of parallel developments shake out. And New York's got the highest tax structure in the world. It's another advantage that Nevada has for businesses. I think we're the second or third most business-friendly state in the country.
New York is trying, though.
New York has the highest tax structure in the country, bar none. California's up there, like number 2, and it's not a close number 2.
They're passing an ad campaign recently, or they passed an ad campaign recently where they've got tax shelters for businesses that want to move to New York, especially upstate New York, outside of the Manhattan area, because you've got a lot of rural area for growth. What happened in the 1970s and 1980s with like Pratt Whitney and Sikorsky in New Jersey, you have a lot of corporate headquarters in that North Jersey area, and they're trying to do the same thing in New York. Use that all that empty space in Albany and
the most corrupt city government in the country.
Yeah, and Buffalo to try to attract businesses there. But still, I mean, it's
one thing that's going to attract people to Buffalo. It's a favorable tax structure.
Right.
No, it's still going to be Niagara South, just a frozen butthole of a shit city, which is only famous for producing Johnny Resnick and the NFL's most storied failed football franchise. So
Scott Norwood left, far left.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean that's exactly my point. Or I think your point too. If you look at it, you're not going to have the same draw to a place like New York. It's not going to change the margin much in terms of tourism. People there are going to spend money on legal marijuana, but more people aren't going to visit it, or more people aren't.
Well, it's going to be so much more expensive, just as a fact of it's so much more expensive to do business there. Period.
Right.
I mean, you'll have the state taxes and the city taxes and the ordinances and the compliance and like all this stuff. The licensing, just the cost of living is so much higher than most of the places in the country. And in Las Vegas, it's relatively cheap.
And plus, New York loves to pass sin tax. That's their favorite thing to do, is take the tax burden and place it upon cigarettes and alcohol. And I have no doubt that the politicians in Albany.
That's why Eric Garner was killed, selling those loose cigarettes.
Yeah.
Can't have a black man making money in America.
Right.
So got to get rid of him.
So, I feel like Albany and City Hall in Manhattan are going to do the same thing and keep passing sin tax on marijuana, even though I don't think it's morally the same thing as tobacco, which clearly is going to kill you, or alcohol, which causes more deaths than every other drug, legal and illegal combined, including cocaine, methamphetamines, heroin, and all prescriptions. So it's unfortunately going to be put in that same umbrella as other drugs and taxed to shit. The same way, if you look at tobacco in New York, it's $12.84 a pack last time I was there, and that was a couple of years ago.
Holy shit.
Especially under Bloomberg, the tax rate on cigarettes went up at least $1.50. So what you have...
Good. I'm in favor of that, frankly.
But what you have happening is a de facto black market, or because of the logistical availability of anything on the East Coast,
from Virginia, New Jersey, wherever.
Exactly.
Just a semi-truck ride
people
away,
are
5-6 hours.
are loading 18-wheelers from North Carolina and Virginia and driving them up into Manhattan and selling them for $6-7 a pack with no taxation.
Right.
And so
you're just out the gas and the storage.
Right. So the tax rate in New York is so high that I think it would fuck up any sort of thriving marijuana industry there.
I mean, I think it'll thrive anyway. I just don't know how much it will thrive compared to the rest of the industry.
Exactly.
Well, it's so fascinating to me because, I mean, we've got business interests all over the country, and just seeing how the local taxes and local regulatory framework differs from city to city in the same state.
Yeah.
I don't know how anybody's going to be doing this stuff long term without massive capitalization, because if cannabis is restricted to the state you operate in unless you have an entire separate manufacturing production facility somewhere else, and you got to get the approval, you got to get the licensing, you got to get all that stuff. So it's every single cannabis market tends to be its own little fiefdom, just because of the regulatory political realities. Over here, the city commissioner doesn't want it. Over here, the city commissioner does. These people have an excise tax. These people don't. And you're talking about within the same state. So there's no real one-to-one comparison. Even Washington, Colorado, the two states that led the recreational charge, Colorado has it set up so that you can have somebody can grow the plants, they can process them, extract them, make edibles from them, whatever, and then sell them at their own dispensary. So you can have a complete vertically integrated operation. Washington State, you cannot. It is separated by law. The grower cannot be an extractor, cannot be a retailer, because they don't want to basically have it have a possibility for monopolization in their regulatory framework.
What I really think is going to happen in the next 10 years, if not in the next 20 years, is you're going to see the federal government step in because of exactly that thing, is the lack of consistency in the regulation, the implementation, and the taxation of marijuana. Now, there's not going to be any sort of federal mandate where they have to do things a certain way. I think it'll be difficult because of the structure of the DEA, and that's going to need to change. It's the federal view on marijuana, which is still prohibitive, which is still illegal.
Well, I think it's going to end up being, and there's this great book called, I believe it's called After Legalization, The Future of Recreational Cannabis. I'm probably butchering the title, but you can find it. It's a great book, and they basically, these guys project, okay, I think they predicted that cannabis would be federally legalized at like 2022, something like that. And they're projecting like 10 years down the road after that, when all the regulations are in place. And it basically just is a lot like alcohol, where it's legal to consume it, but then it is entirely up to the local, municipal, and state governments to dictate whether it's even available in their territory. So you'll have dry counties like you have now. You might have states that have almost de facto prohibition like Utah. And I think that's the way it should be. It should be available for people to buy, but it's not a guarantee that it should be available in if your town votes that they don't want it, then you don't have it. But it should be available to you at a federal level. Nobody can put you in jail for having it. Right. It just might be more difficult to purchase it where you live.
And it's going to be a lot like the way the federal government handles alcohol. There's no mandate yet. There's money tied to it. If you do not follow the federal regulations and guidelines for implementation of legalization of alcohol, the consumption, the legal age of consumption, and how you handle DUIs and arrests, then you lose out on, for instance, tax money for roads. And so what I think you'll have is a standardized age of legalization or legal age of consumption. You need to be 18 or 21 to smoke marijuana. And if you don't, the federal government's going to penalize you by taking money away from your roads projects. And I think that's a fair enough way to do it, because then you'll have that consistency, which doesn't exist right now.
Yeah, I mean, it'll be fairly simple, the overall regulation. Yes, it's legal to consume. I would assume they'll put it at 21. It should be 18, let's be honest. I mean, if you're old enough to get blown up by an IED, if you're a country old enough to smoke a joint.
Safer than alcohol and every benchmark that's ever been
Of course, tested. No one's ever died from consuming marijuana, period. People have driven intoxicated under various substances and gotten in trouble. But, marijuana makes you more cautious.
And this coming from two fairly teetotaling people ourselves.
Teetotaling. There we go. Yeah, it's I don't know. I'm just glad I don't have to worry about any of that stuff. It just seems it's like the Wild West that gets used probably too much as an analogy, but it's true. Where there's no regulatory framework, there is opportunity. And even if somebody who's really on top of things, got a really good legal team, can keep track of things as they develop, there's always going to be opportunity until all of the framework is totally rigid and set. So yeah, I mean, it's the biggest opportunity, I think, of financial opportunity since the .com boom, because that was totally unregulated as well. Anybody with an idea could set up a website and launch a marketplace, and the barriers to entry are a little higher here. But it's not like, okay, you have to be a white middle-aged dude with connections to get in and get started. You can be a black female 19-year-old. And if you've got a good strain or a good edible or a good whatever, you can get in this business and start, and nobody can tell you not to. It's a brand new industry, so it doesn't have those entrenched interests yet. It will, as soon as it's federally declassified or rescheduled, not declassified, Jesus. As soon as it's federally rescheduled, then you're going to have the big money interests that have been eye-banging this industry for a while jumping in both feet. You're going to have then, your pack of cannabis joints at Walmart, for $20 or whatever, sold by Philip Altria or whoever.
Pack of Marlboro Greens. Give me a pack of Marlboro Greens. And of course, the tobacco industry is going to find a way to corrupt it by adding tobacco and highly synthesized and poisoned tobacco that they sell.
Well, it'd be interesting. I mean, I very much doubt there will be any crossover like that at first, because that's already a heavily regulated industry, which is tobacco. And I don't really see them crossing the streams. But what's to prevent Altria from coming in and just buying, doing $1 million to $1 billion buyouts of the big brands like we own them now?
Yeah.
So these people and that's honestly objective of most of the entrepreneurs getting into this business. Nobody's trying to be doing it for 10, 20 years from now. They want to do it for a year or two and then cash out by selling to somebody, which is a shame. I mean, it's built basically on the backs of the prison labor of black and brown people in this country. We've been jailing them at historical rates for 30 years. And now it's like, we as white people get to come in and thanks, we're gonna take it from here.
Yep. Even though the rate of consumption of marijuana amongst black, white, and Hispanic people is like exactly the same.
Yeah, white people tend to use it more.
A little more, right? A fraction more. But you know, it's interesting. I was at Circle K the other day, and people were talking about marijuana. They're like, "Yeah, man, it's legalized," and of course, there's some misconceptions about exactly how it's being implemented and rolled out. And I didn't want to.
Stoner's not great at reading the regulations.
Right. I didn't want to sit and explain it.
What do you mean I can't fire it up on the steps of the courthouse?
Right. But one of the big misconceptions was that private corporations, jobs that people work for, oh yeah, man, I can work in my job and they can't stop me from smoking weed. Oh yeah, they can. Yeah. And that's something that is there's going to be that large gray area there, because alcohol, yes, a job can test for alcohol, and jobs do. Jobs test for nicotine. Health insurance corporations test for nicotine, so that they can evaluate your rates. Yeah. But that's a big difference between marijuana and alcohol or tobacco. Is marijuana stays in your system for a hell of a long time,
up to 90 days,
and yeah, longer in hair samples. So people are still under the regulations of their workplace. And if corporations want to be punitive or restrictive, they can absolutely prevent people from smoking marijuana and keeping their job, which let's face the fact is what most people have to do, is keep a steady job to succeed and function in the world. And yeah, I think that you're going to see almost a possible kind of corporate structure to where jobs that employ more minorities or socially disenfranchised people, economically depressed people, are going to keep testing for marijuana. So in a way, you might see corporate America preventing black and brown people from enjoying marijuana if they want to keep their job.
Yeah, I hadn't thought about that, but there's
pretty crazy.
There's this great article called how hemp convictions hinder black social mobility. And you know, you can get a misdemeanor possession thing that can stick on your record forever and impact your ability to get a job, go to college, get a loan, get any kind of thing that is required for advancement in society.
Absolutely.
So the fact that these racist policies have been in effect for decades have really helped keep down an entire race and class of people. And that tends to be a lot more class-based than strictly race-based these days. You know, there's poor white, poor black, poor brown everywhere, and they all tend to feel the boot of the man to some degree. Right. It's going to be more likely that you feel it if you're of a slightly darker persuasion. But if you're poor, you're going to stay poor.
Yeah.
Statistically, it's guaranteed in this country. Ryan Gosling had that he has this great bit in this documentary, Alec Baldwin, this director shot about trying to get their movie financed. And he talks about basically the lunacy of trying to be an actor. And he's like, you know, you move to LA when you know the odds of you making it are statistically never. Yeah. And that's what it is if you're born into serious institutionalized poverty in this country. Of course, you can make it out. People do. But the huge overwhelming majority do not.
Yeah, I mean, if you look at even when I was living in Florida and Florida, and I grew up in high school in Naples, Florida, which is on the West Coast, and we're just south
West Coast of Florida.
West Coast of Florida, okay. Right? We're just the Gulf Coast, rather.
Oh, okay.
Naples is just south of Immokalee, Florida, which is by and large a agricultural and a migrant farm worker, predominantly migrant.
Super wealthy.
Oh yeah, predominantly Mexican migrant farm workers. And what you had was just unprecedented price gouging for those migrant workers, almost like indentured servitude.
Really?
To where you had
milk cost $20 or something.
Right. You had the company store. You had on-site stores, and not only that, but like to rent an apartment, which was like a tenement, a shack that several families had to share, was something like $1,000 a week that they deducted from
$1,000 a week,
which is why 3 or 4 or 5 families would live in a single unit.
Shit.
And so on top of the fact that they're getting paid cents per unit, a couple cents per unit, like a 1 penny a tomato or 2 pennies or something like that. You had a below minimum wage income because they're not by and large legally certified citizens. And so the system loves to take advantage of them, and they do. And so my point with that is you've got a really disproportionate amount of money being fucked out of poor people, given the fact that they don't have very much money. You've got, the kind of inherent vice taxes, almost the fact that more poor people statistically drink and smoke and consume drugs.
You need something to numb the pain of your existence in a certain way.
Right. And so just the inherent cost of being poor is higher than it is to be a middle or an upper class citizen, because of how people generally try to gouge money out of it. If you look at prepaid phones, payday loans, interest rates, the whole credit system works on, well, if you have more money and good credit, we'll charge you less. And so to get anything as a person who's in poverty or disenfranchised financially, economically, it's just so much more difficult. So you're right. The whole system is structured to keep the man down.
Yeah. It's interesting. I'm not sure how or if this new industry will affect that. Anything that brings in more opportunity and more jobs is good. But it'd be a shame if it ended up being like Silicon Valley, where it's as much of 25-year-old white dudes in hoodies benefiting from this industry. There's this organization nationally called Women Grow that I think it's called an ally of their meetings, because I'm obviously not a woman.
Right.
But it's founded by and institutionalized and membership based for women in cannabis. To be a networking event, to be a support group, to be just a kind of a forum and reference and sounding board for people in the industry who are women, to just come together, kind of like, country clubs of historically for dudes. And I'm hoping we'll see more and more things like that, not just for women. Hopefully, the Black leadership group, Latino leadership group, the Asian leadership group. Right. Even though, obviously, when you say Latino and Asian, you've got massive differences in culture and ethnic backgrounds within somebody who's classified as Asian or Latino. Right. Probably not going to have a lot of Puerto Ricans hanging out with Dominicans, hanging out with Haitians. But like, to have those groups there is a good start, because it's typically taken decades for things like that to show up in a community at all. And so if cannabis can be a good entry point for, all right, well, let's hire, Black or brown people or women, or those businesses are founded by Black or brown people or women, because there is no entrenched power structure to overcome yet. Yeah, the opportunity is there now. So the risk is obviously there because the plant is still federally illegal. But if you are a bright, motivated person of whatever gender, sexual orientation, lifestyle, education background, it's one of the very few industries in the world where you can just go get into it right now and nobody can tell you no.
Well, I think one of the things that, at least on a local level in Las Vegas, that we'll be able to benefit from is the fact that this is an industry that's going to benefit locals just as much as tourists, if not more. And there was a funny...
Actually, the money stays here, so that doesn't benefit the tourists get high, which is what they're after. But
right, of course. And so, obviously, the money from any part of the gaming industry generally benefits locals in terms of tax breaks and money education,
infrastructure,
and stuff like that.
Bridges, roads.
Exactly. But it's funny because there's an article that popped up on Facebook by a friend of mine who writes for the Review Journal, Kristen De Silva, and it's like the top 10 misconceptions of what locals do in Las Vegas, and like what they're not going to do that tourists do, and stupid shit like drinking a yardstick of liquor. We're not going to pay $25 to drink a big thing like that. Going out to major events, like, the Pacquiao fight is great, but all it means for locals is traffic. The NBA coming here in the summer, traffic. The rodeo coming to town, traffic.
Yeah.
So we don't give a shit about that stuff. You know, and it's stuff like that. And it's funny because a lot of stuff that comes to Las Vegas, or a lot of the tourist-based economy, isn't really for us.
We're not going
by
to the
our
world
choice.
We're not going to the World of Concrete Expo. I did have to go to that at one point in my previous life as an accountant for a construction company. It was not the most exciting time in my life. But yeah, you're not going unless you're part of that business.
But the great thing is that I assume there are plenty of people in Las Vegas who are consuming marijuana who have a Nevada driver's license.
You don't have to assume.
No,
it's a guarantee.
Yeah. And so yeah, you've got an industry that is going to benefit locals just as much, and it isn't a punitive thing like gambling, or it isn't a dangerous vice like gambling. That's a big concern: is, are locals going to gamble more in Las Vegas because they have access to gambling everywhere from the gas station to the myriad casinos? And the answer is yes. Of course, the gambling problem and the problematic gambling in Las Vegas is much higher for the citizens here than it is in Topeka, Kansas, statistically, just because of access. But, you know, personally, I've never not been able to get a drug in Las Vegas when I've looked for one, and seldom has anyone.
Well, yeah, it's again, the raison d'etre for this city.
Right. Drugs are easily available, more so than anywhere else in the country where they're easily available, because there are people who specifically are in business to middleman between tourists and people visiting and the drug dealers. So
the concierge does not have cocaine at the MGM Grand, but he can, like, they don't have a cocaine room, but they can get it for you.
Yeah, exactly.
So that's what the entire bedrock of that particular
and so it's already here anyway. And what it's going to do is it's going to take away that risk of locals in Las Vegas who want to get marijuana from having to buy it from the Sinaloa cartel, or, you know, having to travel out of state and then risk interstate transport of marijuana from another state where it might be legal. So it is something that greatly benefits people locally. It's going to add to the tax base. It's going to legalize a drug that helps many people in terms of pain and in terms of dealing with life, and it takes away that risk of having to go and buy it illegally.
Right, and it's going to be a good employment opportunity. I mean,
exactly.
You have a billion-dollar business. There's going to be thousands of jobs associated with that. So, would you rather pull a double shift at the Sands, you know, working, you know, cocktail waitressing until 3 in the morning?
Yes, I would.
Driving out to Summerlin, or, you know, North Las Vegas somewhere, and then having that shitty commute, or, you know, doing 8 to 10 hours a day in a dispensary where you're selling medicine to help people enjoy life or ameliorate symptoms of conditions.
Right. Yeah, absolutely.
Obviously, most people choose to work in the dispensary, whether or not they actually like cannabis.
Yeah.
Just because people are happy when they come in. You're not dealing with a lot of shitheads. And yeah, you're selling a product that improves people's lives. Right.
Yeah. I mean, with all of our businesses, that's something we've talked about, is we've always wanted to be involved with business that, of course, makes money and we can do it well. But at the end of the day, it's nice to know that you're selling something, or you're involved in an industry that helps people, that improves the quality of their life, and people derive a great amount of joy out of it.
Yeah, I mean, it's like, well, I didn't mind working retail in high school and first part of college. I was selling video games.
Yeah.
You know, there's very few people who come in to buy video games who are angry.
Yeah.
Like, fuck, I got to buy Madden, Kerr. It's like, oh yeah, sweet, I get my video game. This is awesome.
And that's when I get to dork out the most. I mean, it's no secret that we are both closet nerds, or not closeted nerds.
You're fully out nerds.
But I mean, I'm right now wearing a Bill Murray t-shirt for anyone listening and not viewing. So you absolutely get to just super nerd out when you go into GameStop and talk to the 550-pound guy with the bad mustache behind the counter, or whoever.
Comic book guy.
Yeah. And I mean, I love that. I love going into the comic book store and nerding out about the new Deadpool stuff going on, or going into the GameStop and talking about the incumbent special edition of Fallout 4 that's coming out.
Shit, yeah, November, I think. Right?
November.
That's coming out soon.
Yeah, man. October 31st, I think, or no, November 12th.
Something like that. Yeah. So we're just going to have to make sure to carve out room in the schedule. Put all our manufacturing requirements, like make sure they're taken care of for about a week.
Yeah.
So, you know, Johnny can just submerge himself.
Hire someone for a week so I can just sit in a pool of my own filth and Cheetos crumbles and play Fallout. Oh, I'm so excited.
Good, man. I mean, hey, that's the whole reason that this show is called what it's called.
It is.
I've been playing Fallout for over 20 years, I guess. When did Fallout come out? 95?
98, I think.
That was Fallout 2, was 98. I'm trying to remember when Fallout came out. I think it was like 95.
Was it that early?
I believe so.
I started playing it in like 97 because I remember I was a senior in high school. And then I remember Fallout 2 came out shortly afterwards, and it had the improved combat system where if you pull a gun out in a random screen, you can actually put it away and people will walk away instead of everyone becoming hostile.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, late 90s, both of them started coming out. Then there was Fallout Tactics and Brotherhood of Steel, and
which is, I don't know if I've beaten that game to this day. It's gonna be one of the longest games in history, and it's one of those few cases where you're like, I don't need it to be this long.
Yeah.
I think because a map could take you like 9 hours to beat, and you could die at any point along the way. You'd have to restart the entire thing. So you get 8 hours into it, you trip a claymore you didn't see because everything on the screen is this big.
Yeah.
And then boom, one of your critical party member goes down. You got to start. You couldn't save in mission. You have to start all the way over, which is infuriating. What I'm going to do, actually, now that I'm thinking about it, I got some free time tomorrow. I'm going to reinstall the game. I'm just going to cheat like a madman, probably beat the game in about 45 minutes.
Okay.
Yeah. Unlimited action points, just walk around, just blowing people away like I usually do.
Yeah.
And then, because, you know, I prefer to stomp through games like, you know, a natural disaster. It's not fun frustration for me is not enjoyable. So when you're a kid, it's fun, like the challenge and the puzzle. Now as an adult, I'm like, I've got 45 minutes of free time. I just want to murder things.
See, I loved playing things the right way. And then I remember when I was teaching high school, I had a student, Earl, who we were both Earl.
Wow.
Earl was cool. He always had matching sneakers and hats. And, you know, it was hard to say, hey, take off your hat. Because, I mean, he matched it to his goddamn sneakers.
Yeah.
But Earl, we were both playing Elder Scrolls Oblivion, and I was like, oh yeah, I'm a high dwarf or a high elf and archer, and I'm doing this and oh yeah, you know, I'm now friends with the king of this town. He's like, I just killed everyone in Kvatch, and I'm like, everyone? He's like, everyone, and I just thought like I could just do whatever. This whole world is there to just serve your character.
That's why I like RPGs the best, man. And Fallout 2 is one of the first games that let you get that dark, where there was a special achievement you could unlock in the game if you killed every single child in the world. And I unlocked that. I didn't even know about it. I was just like, I'm not a big fan of kids in real life. I've got 4 godchildren and 5 nieces. I love them all dearly. But kids in general, not a big fan. So
that is the biggest qualification for a great video game for me is, can you kill the kids in the game? And that's what really upset me in Fallout 3 is you can't kill the kids.
I know. How dare, like, this is a apocalyptic wasteland. How many billions of children died before this game even started?
And they specifically made them fucking sons of bitches.
Yeah.
Just the most annoying people ever.
There was this character in Baldur's Gate way back in the day called Lowber, named after, you know, noobs.
Yeah.
And every time he showed up on his little map screen, he was like 4 times faster than any character. And he'd catch up to you, and he would force a speech interaction. You could not, but hey ya. You're like, hey guys, what do you think of this? Hey guys, what do you think of that? Hey guys, what do you think of this? And normally if you killed him, it was like a massive loss of like reputation with the town, and like people would attack you. But a couple times, because I was like, there's gonna be a way to kill this dude. I killed him, and one time I gained reputation with the town. So that was very satisfying. Even if I do incur the wrath of the town, and end up murdering everyone. That's the nice part about being a high-powered character in an RPG. Is once you hit a certain level, you're just a god made flesh.
Yeah.
You're walking around with your 8-foot sword of plus 25 lightning, and like anybody comes within 10 feet of you, they're just automatically killed by your aura.
Yeah.
Templar.
God, I was playing, not to digress too far into video games, but I was playing Metro 2033. Which is basically a first-person shooter, zombie, you're fighting.
Survival horror set in a Russian dystopian future.
Exactly.
Which is about as dystopian as it gets, because Russia's pretty fucked up in the best of days.
And it got pretty dark. Like there was a couple nights where I couldn't play it at night just because it was super scary. But there's this one part where you run into a kid, the boy, and you have to take him and pick him up and carry him through this part where there's all these lurkers, these little imp-like human demon things. It's awful. And carrying him creates a lag to where you can't shoot normally. I mean, it totally fucks up the whole dynamic of the game for 25 minutes. And it was just the worst thing because he's like, hey, there's another one. Hey, there's another one. And you're trying to kill them and you can't control it. It's like being on ketamine in a video game. And I fucking wanted to kill this kid so bad. Just throw him down a well. And there was all these perfect little child-sized holes everywhere that went down to the hellish underworld.
And as soon as you set him down, you automatic, like, game over. Game over. Game over. Can't touch him. Game over. Yeah, those automatic restrictions. Because I like things that kind of mirror reality. Like, in this world, you can do what you want.
There are consequences.
There are consequences, but you can do it.
Right.
You're not saying you should, empty a shotgun into a kid. You could if you wanted to. There's going to be consequences for that, but you can't. I don't like artificial limits. Like, I always hated that in video games back in the day. We'd run into the invisible wall, so you can't go here.
Right.
And nowadays, computers tend to be powerful enough, and gaming tends to be powerful enough. They can just, you're not going to ever get anywhere. It's going to be an infinitely repeating.
No kill screen necessary.
But yeah, you can just go in a direction to keep going. Playing on rails is not fun.
Right. Which is why I like sandbox games, because it gives you the option to do exactly what the game intended, play the storyline or not. Mm-hmm. And yeah, absolutely. It's I like that system, and I think that's what makes good video games such an asset in our culture. Is you could do whatever you want, but there are consequences.
Yeah, and the fun of video games for me is I can indulge my worst impulses with no real life consequences.
Right.
If I want to murder a city, I can. If I want to burn down that orphanage and defecate on the ashes, I can.
Right.
I'm not going to do those things in real life. I'm not a monster. But everybody has those thoughts and those desires to just murder sometimes. When you can get that out in a virtual format, it's just as satisfying as if you actually let loose with a machine gun at the shopping mall. And more importantly, you're not hurting anything.
It actually releases the same chemical or similar chemical to if you were to go out and shoot a bunch of people in a good way. It's like a mollifying effect.
Yeah,
you get the buzz from it without having to do anything bad in real life.
Yeah, I'm all in favor of things like that, and video games have that effect on me, and cannabis has that effect on a lot of people. So it'd be interesting to see. I hope that it turns out that it's a big employment opportunity for people. It brings a lot of revenue to the state and to the tax coffers and to business. Mm-hmm. And it helps kind of level the playing field in terms of this business. Because if you're, like I said, if you're white, black, fat, thin, gay, straight, trans, cis, whatever personal makeup you have, it's not a barrier to get into this business.
Right.
And that can't be said for almost every other industry on earth. This is one of the very few times we're going to see in our history where there's an industry where you can just get into it. Yeah. You can just do it. You can't do that with tobacco. You can't do that with food. You can't do that with cars. You can't do that unless you're Elon Musk and you start off rich. And you're like, I'm going to get into cars. And you take insane gambles and they pay off. But most industries have been around for years, decades, epochs. And so this being, it's not that hard to grow a plant.
Right.
But with it being legal now for the first time in 100 years, you can just find your niche and get in.
Well, I mean, if you look at like drug dealing in general, illegal drug dealing was a pretty meritocratic system, except for gangs and structures. I mean, that's a lot of what made kingmakers in Mexico. You had people who were born in the poorest barrios coming up and able to become the strongest, the best.
Despite not being able to read.
Right.
In some cases.
Having very little education, having very little family or social or financial advantages growing up. Mm-hmm. And just pure will, you had these men, of course, evil in the sense that they were not evil, but they were willing to do what no one else is willing to do. They were willing to go further than anyone was willing to go. And that generally meant a lot of evil. Bad stuff.
Yeah.
Decapitations, killing families.
Faces.
Right. Yeah. You've got, there's that book that you lent me, The Power of the Dog. You've got the way to kill a snitch is, un dedo, an informant. Is to cut their fingers off, shove them in their mouth, and shoot in the back of the head. Mm-hmm. So you have all these really horrible ways to kill people and killing their family and torturing their family, cutting their faces off.
Colombian necktie is always a popular one.
Right.
So somebody still pull their tongue out through the hole in their throat. There's a lot of grim stuff.
Right. I don't want to go into all of it, but basically you've got people who because of the sheer will of what they're willing to do, are able to become the most powerful people. Luckily, the legal cannabis industry does not have to indulge those horrible, murderous,
and gets rid of most of it,
right?
At least in that aspect of the business.
Well, that's an interesting point, and I think we've definitely discussed it personally, but we've mentioned on the show how this legalization takes money directly out of the pockets of a dangerous black market. Mm-hmm. And as we've just illustrated, a black market that's not even because it's fun or they're sadomasochistic. It's the price of business.
Well, it's because the stakes are so high.
Right. Billions of dollars people are going to have
tax-free.
People are going to have to demonstrate that they're willing to do more than the other people.
Yeah,
and that's
so they can take advantage of you go down.
Right.
Yeah.
And, if you look at even like Carlito's Way, Pacino didn't pay attention to, John Leguizamo, who was the young upstart who was willing to do what he wasn't willing to do.
The Barksdales didn't pay attention to Marlowe and The Wire. And,
right.
There's the king does not necessarily stay the king.
Right.
The king stays the king if he's willing and able to eliminate every rival and potential rival.
Right.
Potential rival is the sticking point for a lot of people. You're talking about kids or family members.
Sure.
Well, if you want that money and it's completely open playing field, then you've got to do what you got to do to get and keep it. But yeah, within the regulatory framework of the states, I mean, we've been to enough cannabis networking events and talked to enough people in the industry that it ends up being, you're just swapping life experiences and talking about how this plan has helped you or people that you know and deal with different things. And it ends up being hugely positive.
Yeah. But
the majority of the time, in my experience, now again, I'm a middle-class white dude and I'm not competing with the cartels. Yeah, I have yet to see a downside of it. Obviously there's a potential for abuse. People, cannabis can affect your brain negatively when you're developing. People can develop psychological addictions to it.
Right. I mean, you could
use it.
Right. And you could become psychologically addicted to sugar. And anything that you could ingest in your body that's going to give you a sense of comfort.
A positive chemical reaction.
Exactly, can be abused. And the biggest dangerous drugs in the United States right now are food and alcohol.
Mm-hmm.
Food and alcohol and tobacco kill 95% of preventable deaths. Cars are the biggest one. Well, yeah, I think if you did cars, food, tobacco, and alcohol, that probably accounts for 95% of.
Let's not forget guns.
Guns, yeah,
cars,
but even
food, alcohol, guns, tobacco.
Even with the record number of gun-related killings in the United States, those numbers from guns are still pale in comparison to heart disease, diabetes, alcohol-related deaths.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, no, I think gun reform is something that is just badly overdue, and I'm very scared to think that we live in a country where our government will never do anything about it, because I mean, how many fucking Sandy Hooks do you need before there's common sense reforms for fucking assault rifles? I mean, we both own guns. I come from a family of gun owners, but I Jen and I, my wife and I, were having this conversation the other day. It's like, I want an AR-15. It would be cool to have, just because while it's legal, sure, why not? Zombie apocalypse, yada yada yada.
Well, just target shooting.
Right, it's fun.
We're statistically, you're going to be part of the millions of people that die in any apocalyptic scenario. So
right, but it's fun to have. But I don't need one. There's no situation where I ever need an assault rifle.
And I like that press conference that Chuck and Amy Schumer gave. After the shooting at her movie Trainwreck, and they were just like, all we want, just put in background checks to make sure that criminals, the mentally ill, and other dangerous people cannot get their hands on guns.
That's it.
It's like it's common sense that those should already be in place, and it's not.
Second Amendment.
Yeah, I mean, it was kind of funny. I was home in my home state of Seattle last weekend and watching the Blue Angel demonstration, which is, for those who don't know, Blue Angels is the Navy's basically big recruitment program. They have stunt pilots taken from the Marines and the Navy who fly these F-18 Hornet fighter bombers.
Super cool.
And they do these choreographed air shows, which is phenomenal. They fly so close, the wings touch. I mean, they're doing these like 7G.
I couldn't believe that when you told me that. Yeah. That's crazy. crazy.
They're doing these 7G loop-de-loops. They're flying 450 miles an hour, 100 feet off the ground. They're phenomenal. And you look at that and you go, that's a 30-year-old plane.
Right.
30 years old. That technology is almost as old as me. And what do I have? An AR-15? Like, how am I going to fight the government?
Right,
the right to bear arms does not do anything to prevent. Like, the government's just going to drone your house. If it comes down to it, the government will just eliminate you without ever leaving Washington, D.C.
There was a great documentary that Frontline did about Libya, and it did Libya and Afghanistan at the same time. But what it focused on, it had a reporter embedded with the Libyan rebels, who the CIA, part of the most powerful government in the world, at least militarily, the United States, was funding the rebels and taking 80 rebels every month and training them in a training camp in Qatar. And they wanted to
side of the 2022 World Cup.
Right.
Whoop, whoop.
They wanted to train 40,000 rebels because that's how many they felt. I'm sorry, Syria, not Libya. That's how many they felt would be necessary.
Qatar is not Libya.
No.
They were training Syrian rebels.
Right.
Okay.
And basically
take out Bashar.
Right. Basically, what they needed was about 40,000 rebels to take the Bashar al-Assad regime down. And even with military support from the CIA and the American government, the rebels, it would take something like 45 years for them to train enough people to actually do any substantive damage against the regime. And what was happening was you had a well-funded, armed militia with lots of conventional weapons, but they had to live in fear and completely black out every night because the Syrian government, which is by no means rich or the most powerful military, had F-16s, F-14s, and F-18s who just blew whatever up they saw at night with lights on. So you had the U.S. supported rebels in Syria couldn't touch most of the areas of the country because, again, a government has weapons and a military structure that most rebels can't.
Yeah, I mean, you
do anything to.
You can make your arguments about whatever, but even if you look at something like the cartel in Mexico, which is a multi-billion-dollar operation, and they have their own homemade like submarines and tanks. Right, yeah. Anytime they get into an open exchange with the military, they lose.
Right.
So the right to bear arms as a defense against a corrupt government is laughable in the 21st century. It was laughable 100 years ago, let's be honest. Post-Civil War, it was laughable.
Right. It was when you had one person with a gun that fired a bullet a minute, roughly, that everyone was on an equal playing field.
Yeah.
As soon as you had automatic rifles or semi-automatic rifles, which, the Spanish-American War had the first really powerful water-cooled machine gun. And that was it. Game over. That's the Spanish-American War in 1899.
Warren Buffett and Bill Gates and Carlos Slim could pool their money together, and they, the finest fighting force that their 250 combined billion could buy, and they would be wiped out in a week by half the U.S. military.
Yeah.
So the three richest people in North America combined couldn't ding it. So Earl Billy Ray Bobob up in the Appalachians or Florida with his modified AK-47 might be able to do some damage to the first responders. But then here comes the SWAT team. Like your most heavily armed person now couldn't take out a SWAT team.
Yeah.
So it's like, let's just all buy cannabis and enjoy that. Get rid of the guns. How about, that's the best buyback program. Trade in your guns for
guns
weed.
for drugs.
Guns for drugs, man. Like if we're going to arm the Contras in Nicaragua with, with a weapons for drugs program, let's do it here domestically.
Yeah, why not?
That's the solution. So for John and me from Black Mountain Radio, that's a free policy solution for the domestic government out there. Give people drugs in exchange for guns, and within a year you'll have no more guns left.
But just cannabis. Don't give out just meth cannabis. And shit.
Obviously, yeah. If you give people weed in exchange for guns, I guarantee you the gun ownership rate in this country would go down about 90% conservatively. So there you go. Give people weed, and they will give you their guns. And we're out.
All right.
For John Douglas, I'm Daniel Lowber. This has been Black Mountain Radio. Next week, we should be coming to you live from Cashman Center. Probably doing a simulcast in Spanish if my compatriot here can.
Realmente estoy hablando español.
Maria, ¿por qué? I got that from a telenovela I saw once. It's about my only Spanish, but we'll see you next week.